Hey, my name is Rick Canterbury. I'm going to host today on Archery Talk 101. Now, what we're going to talk about today is a little history of archery. That's something that is kind of interesting. How long has archery been around? And I've been able to trace back. The oldest known traces of archery was discovered in South Africa, dating back 64,000 years ago. That's amazing that long ago they have had archery. Uh, and then archaeologists digging in a Sri Lanka cave found what appeared to be a 48,000-year-old arrowhead crafted from animal bone. Until that time when those were found, previously the earliest evidence of bow hunting was in Southeast Asia, dating back 32,000 years. That it just keeps going on and on. The Egyptian and the neighboring Nubian cultures used bows in the late Paleolithic period, around 10,000 BC. And in China, archery dates back to the Shang Dynasty in 1660 or 1766 to 1027 BC. So we're saying that's a lot of history in here just in the sport of archery. During that time, a war chariot carried a three-man team, a driver, a lancer, and an archer. That's kind of interesting how they teamed them up like that, and nice little team sport there. During the Chu dynasty, from 1027 to 256 BC, the nobles at the courts attended sports archery tournaments where there's music and salutations. That was kind of more of a tournament type instead of war weapons at the time. So now, when the Chinese introduced archery to Japan in the 6th century, it had an overriding influence on later etiquette and techniques. One of Japan's martial arts was originally known as Koijitsu, the art of the bow. Now it's known as, Koendo. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it's the way of the bow. The modern version of the bow, the archer used a series of steps before moving to the firing line. They go through a certain process to get mentally and physically prepared to shoot, and then they step up to the firing line, and then they would draw their bow and go through the process. It's the same thing. They do the same thing over and over and over. So it was just kind of a instinctive thing that they would build up. So everything did the same, and they had no variations. Now, the bows they used at that time, they were shot at a distance of 28 meters at a 35 centimeter target. Now, that's roughly 30 yards at a 14-inch target. So kind of equate to what a lot of us understand, when you think of meters and yards, so us over here in the States, we don't think in meters as much. So it kind of give you a little rough estimate there. Now, the bow they used, they said, was 2.21 meters long. Now, that's a long bow. It's about 87 inches, and it was made of laminate strips of bamboo and wood that laminate those together. Now, going during the Greco-Roman period, the bow was used more for hunting and recreation rather than warfare. So now it's starting to move into more of a recreational and hunting weapon instead of for war. During this time, you could find archers, on their pottery. They would depict them when they would make some of their pottery items. They depict archers on it. Just kind of a thing that we're finding in some of the archaeological digs that was on their pottery. And the Parthians were horsemen that developed a skill while they're riding the horse at full gallop to be able to rotate in the saddle, turn around, and shoot from behind them. That just seems like it'd be an awful lot of work, have to do a lot of practicing to be on a galloping horse, turn around and shoot behind you. It's hard enough sometimes to shoot straight without moving. So I thought that was interesting when I read about that. The Middle Eastern superiority in archery equipment and technique continued for centuries. They had that superior archery equipment and techniques, and that carried on for a long time. Now, Attila the Hun, his Mongols conquered much of Europe and Asia. until they faced the Asian and Turkish bows. They were highly effective, and the record shot with a composite Turkish bow was close to 900 yards. Now think about that, 900 yards with a bow. Not how effective you'd be at hitting a specific target, but at times when you have lots of arrows coming, you don't have to be accurate. Just that number is going to be, quite a sight to see. Now, those bows, the Turkish composite bows, had much more capability than the English U bow. They were stronger. They just seemed like they were just a better bow, and that's just one of those things that you develop better equipment, better shooting, and you're going to have a little superior skills with that. Now, popularity in archery has been reflected in many ballads and folklore. Everybody knows the story of Robin Hood, where he shot an arrow and split another arrow right down the middle of the shaft. With wood, that can be a challenge, but it's folklore. So did it happen? Did it not happen? Getting that Robin Hood, there's many people have done it. I've done it a few times where I've split an arrow right down the middle of it, either with aluminum. I've done it with aluminum, and I've done it with both carbon arrows. I haven't done it yet with wood because I don't shoot a lot of wood arrows anymore. I've kind of grown into the aluminum and then the carbon, but I've done it with both of those. It's interesting when they hit in the back of them and they just split that shaft right down there. Now, one of the first known competitions in archery was held in Finsbury, England in 1583, and there was 3,000 participants in that. Now that was, that's quite a few participants in 1583 to have an archery competition. I didn't find out, any information about, what the scores were, what the distances, but that was kind of interesting, I thought, when I come across that information. Now, by the time of the 30-year War, 1618 to 1648, with the introduction of gunpowder, bows as a weapon belonged kind of in the past. At least that's what, they were thinking at that time. But, there's still evidence here today, and within even just the last few years, where archery is still used by some of your military for warfare. I'll get into that here just in a little bit more detail in that. But, in modern days, archery is mostly a recreational competitive sport. So you're going to just shoot for the fun of shooting, or you're going to compete, or you're going to hunt. That's kind of modern. That's what archery is normally used for these days. It's not really used too much in battles, because modern firearms is going to be some advantage in there. So let's go ahead and let's take a look now at some of the modern military uses of archery. The bow and arrow might be the right job, right tool for that job. So depending on what it is, there's certain situations where that could be a big advantage to have that bow and arrow, because it is quiet. You don't have the noise, the bang of a firearm going off, so it can be quiet. So I'm going to go over, I found some information. Some of it's about 3 years old, but that's still not that far away. And what I found was in Taiwan, the ROC, the Mountain Company, has an archery unit. The unit's tactics are mostly ambush or hit and run. The dense forest in there and the heavy underbrush and mountainous terrain, the archery can be a real good weapon. Like you can basically, shoot and run, and you don't know where it's coming from. China uses crossbows for several operations, usually in border and civilian suppression. Because it is quiet. It's a nice alternative to firearms at time. Now in Vietnam, during the Vietnam War, a group of Vietnamese soldiers, nationals, were in a group. They fought with the U.S. military. They used crossbows against the Viet Cong. Now, it was rumored that the Green Berets found these effective ambush and hit and run techniques, effective, but I haven't really found any evidence yet that they actually used them. The Green Berets used them. but the Vietnamese nationals, they use them because it is a quiet, effective weapon, especially at close range in jungle areas. Another modern usage. So your military groups have removed the bow as an assassination weapon, like we talked about just briefly earlier. Rifles are just better due to the range. You're not going to take a bow, which is quieter, but you have a much shorter range. Are you going to be effective out to 100 yards? Are you going to be effective, 40 yards? How many of us can actually shoot accurately at 40 or 50 and keep them into, like a 6-inch group at those longer ranges? It takes a lot of practice. Now, when you're using, your snipers, they're going to be long range. They're going to be hundreds of yards away. And by the time you hear the sound, the shot has already impacted the point. You've already hit your target. Now, here's another situation that archery might be well used. Is like in civil unrest, in a suburban area where you don't want to blow up the city. You don't want to send in, missiles and stuff like that, because, it destroys pretty much anything, and you're indiscriminate in what you're going to shoot at. So when a city is extremely hostile, a single building could be a potential hiding spot, explosives, etc., where you're going in, without the boom of the guns, an archer on the rooftop can hit a target without making it obvious which building he's on. When you hear a sound, you can know where it's coming from. But that archer, you're not going to know until the arrow hits somewhere. And then you don't always know which direction it came from. He can really easily release that arrow and run away, before an arrow makes its impact. You can shoot and move before they really know. Not relying on gunpowder makes him especially dangerous, as he can either recover or manufacture his own arrows with relative ease. One of the things I remember the show Red Dawn, where the gist of it, if you haven't watched it, it's kind of an interesting show. I watched the original one. They have another one, but the original one I think is a really good one, where forces a paratroop in, and these high school kids, they run off and they had a bow. One of the things they took was a bow, as well as other things. Nice thing about the bow is it's able to shoot at the enemy, and they didn't know which way it was coming from, and then run and hide. Now, back in 1961, the 19th Special Forces Group, based out of Draper, Utah, they had a demonstration where they videoed the effectiveness of a bow and arrow versus some firearms. Now, what they had done was they had took a box and filled it full of dirt. They had 2 cardboard dividers, so dividing the box up into 3 different sections. And it was probably, 6-8 inch wide box. It wasn't really very thick. And they shot at it with a 45 caliber, 1911A1 45 caliber. And they shot at it with a 30 M1 carbine and a 30 caliber M1 rifle, which is basically the 30-06. And you think, that's a pretty powerful rifle. And then they shot at it with a recurve with a 2-blade broadhead. Now, here's the results. All 3 penetrated the box, which was, you'd expect that. All 3 penetrated that first layer of the divider. So that'd be the first third of the target. Now, the 30 carbine put a dent in the second cardboard inside of there. And the M1 rifle, which is the 30-06, it went all the way through both sections, but did not come out the back of the box. Now remember, this is filled with dirt. It's not really that thick. Now they shot at the box with a bow. And that bow not only penetrated all 3 sections, it come out the back by several inches. They didn't really show how far it come out, but it looked like it come out, probably, maybe 2 hand widths, but, maybe 8-10 inches, maybe 6 inches. It's enough that if you was leaning up a dirt bunker like that, that broadhead would come through, and it would be enough to do some damage to whatever's on the other side. So, you don't think about how much that bow can penetrate. one of the things that you look at, like these bulletproof vests, if they don't have that steel trauma plate in there, if it's just the Kevlar, it will stop the bullets. It will not stop an arrow. You know, with that broadhead on there, it will penetrate because it cuts. You got to think about on those Kevlar vests. What is that? It's a fabric. They have to cut it. So they cut it with scissors and they sew it, where it'll stop a bullet because of the way it works, where you're cutting through it, broadheads go right through it. So they don't protect you. You know, bulletproof vests won't protect you against an arrow. So that's something to think about too. You know, if you do have somebody with a bow, they will penetrate those stuffs. I know I had an arrow one time. I missed the target, and it stuck the arrow clear up to the fletching, and it was through a steel commercial door. It penetrated clear up there, and that was at 20 yards with a field tip at 70 pounds, and it penetrated that steel door. And that's a commercial door, not, you know, the commercial ones that are, you know, that they're nice and thick. It's not the residential ones that are fairly thin. And now there are some archers that, you know, really inspiring, inspirational to other archers. And I'm going to give you an example of a guy that was born in 1982. His name is Matthew Stutzman. He was born with no arms, and he competed in the 2012 and 2016 Paralympics and won silver in 2012. But remember, he's drawn it with his legs. He has no arms. And then he has the release is by his jaw, and then he can just move his jaw and fire it. You know, so that was you know, quite interesting to watch that. I watched the replay of that, a YouTube video I watched, and that was quite interesting. And the guy he was shooting against only had one arm. Now, I was at a competition here locally, and I seen two different guys walking around with a bow. One had the right arm missing, and the other one had the left arm missing, clear at the shoulder. So they only had one arm. They didn't have a stub or nothing, and they were shooting. And what they would do is there's a little chew tab or bite tab. They'd bite on that and then use the other arm to pull it out. And ready, they just release the jaw to shoot. I didn't ever see how they shot and how well they performed, because I was doing other things. I was helping put on the tournament, so I wasn't able to go through and actually watch them shooting and see how they did. But that was quite interesting. So just a little quick summary. The oldest known archery is 64,000 years ago, and it was South Africa, and can still be found, and it's still found in modern warfare. You know, up to, you know, a few years ago, there are still armies that are using crossbows and longbows. The archery today is mostly used for hunting, competition, recreation. You know, it's not normally used in warfare. It's the problem with that is it's a little bit harder to carry a lot of ammo with you, you know, and it takes longer to shoot. So, you know, sometimes it's not really that, but archery is so much fun, and just doing for recreation is really, really nice to do. It's a lot of fun. One of the things you got to do is remember, when you're shooting a bow, you have to be relaxed. So a lot of us use it for stress relief, because we go out, we shoot, we have to completely relax. The only thing we're thinking about, we're concentrating on the target, everything else goes away. So it's a nice, relaxing sport for those of you that are doing it. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're not much of an archer, you know, get with one, find somebody that will give you a chance to do some shooting, just to see, you know, it might be for you. And those of us that are archers, we kind of already know that. So, and we're always glad to help people. And, you know, archery can be started at any age. There's no upper limit or lower limit. The lower limit would be, are they able to hold a bow and actually draw it back? You know, there's kids 3 and 5 years old are shooting. I know all my kids started when they was they'd all been shooting by the time they was 5. So that's a lifelong sport. And I know archers that have been shooting for 70 years. I've got in the Archery Talk 101 Facebook group, we have one guy that's been shooting for 70 years. I haven't quite been shooting that long. I've been shooting for probably 55 years anyway. So it's a sport that you can last. You may have to change, as you're growing up. You might get stronger and stronger bows, and then you get a little older. We might, take the poundage down, so it's not quite so hard to pull back. But that's just all something that we can do, and there's just no reason to not keep shooting. So, what places you can get some information? Like I mentioned, the Archery Talk 101 Facebook group. I'll leave a link to there. There we have a lot of archers to help you out. If you're struggling with anything in archery, get in that group, because we have instructors and bow techs in there. They've been doing this for a couple decades. So we have a lot of information in there. In fact, if you want to take a video yourself and upload it to the group, we'd be glad to take a look at it and give you some pointers. The other place you can go out and get some information is archerytalk101.com. That website, there will be a lot of the information on shooting form techniques, as well as any reviews of products that we have to do. There'll be links into there where you can buy the products, as well as reviews, get information there. That's a good resource to go there. And of course, the podcast is always a good place to go there. One of the things that we do have available for those that are interested in taking their archery skills to the next level is we have coaching available. We do an online coaching program where you'll videotape yourself, upload it to the instructor, and the instructor review it, make comment on it, and then weekly you'll get in a Zoom call with the instructor, and we can go over whatever problems you might be having, kind of help you through the troubles. That's a good program too, and you can always get some good help on that. You can find the information. You go out to the Archery Talk 101 Facebook group or the archerytalk101.com. There will be links in there where you can find out information on coaching and see if you can take your archery skills to the next level. So once again, my name is Roy Canterbury, and I've been your host today on Archery Talk 101, and we'll see you next week for the next one.